Well, hello there, Retro PC Durham. It's Chris here with another machine. It's been a while since I've had one of these on the table, a FrankenPC. That's right. So this is a build of semi-random parts, trying to get some semblance of a PC that will run working together on the low end of low end, and you will soon see what I mean by that. We'll have the trusty orange screwdriver out here in a moment. Let's take a look at this old E-Machines case. You'll see some strangeness going on here. First of all, we've got our DVD multi-burner installed in the front. And why I don't have another optical drive here, in the absence again of a missing panel, is the inside of this system. I couldn't get a second drive able to screw in. There's no hole that lines up correctly with the standard optical device setup. I would need to have an optical drive that actually has like both sets of screws. I'll show you what I mean. On a CD-ROM drive, I'm just pulling one out of the bin here. You've got your standard 4 pins here. Sometimes on like older models, I think you see where you've got like a second pair. So there's 4 here and 4 here instead of just 2 and 2. I would need an optical drive that has that to fit here, because it doesn't have both sets of screw holes to be able to connect it on the top bay. The bottom bay does have them, so I was able to screw this one in. Anyways, it is what it is. So I got some cardboard fit in here, and then I used some electrical, or not electrical, kind of like semi-duct tape, semi-permanent tape to cover this area up a little bit, just to at least give it a little bit of a block out. There's still a little bit of a gap here. I didn't want to go down too far that I would be covering up this opening here, so that's why there's a little bit of a gap. And then we've got our old floppy drive here, power button, hard drive alert, and then down at the bottom here we have some connections here for a pair of USB ports, and then our audio connectors. We switch around to the back. Sorry, a little bit heavy. I should just lift these things up. We've got our power supply, one of the ones that I actually have opened up and made sure does not have bad caps on it, which is a mistake that I've made not too long ago, that I hadn't checked them for some reason and ended up burning out, I think, a system board that I was trying to work on. And yeah, so I've since gone through and tested all the ones I have and opened them up to make sure they don't have any bad caps, so I don't run into that problem again. So we've got our power supply here, system board. You can see our connectors on here, old style PS2 and mouse connectors. We've got our old ports here. I'm not using the onboard VGA. We've got another video card that's on here, and you'll see that you may be able to see that there's a little bit of weirdness going on with how this video card is looking. That doesn't look quite right. Why is it? Why can I see through, and why is there a zip tie there? Yeah, we'll show you what the problem with that is right now when we open up this case and take a look inside. So I'm going to unscrew my screws. This E-Machines case, I think, must have had like captive screws or something previously, because I couldn't use regular case screws. I ended up having to use these much longer ones. These much longer ones to get it to close properly. But, I mean, it works now. So we'll take a look on the inside of the system here and show you what we've got. So, first things first, we'll take a look. I've got this power supply here. It's a little tiny bit of overkill because it is rated as a 500 watt power supply, which definitely this board and everything does not need. But it works. It had all the ports that the connectors for power that I needed, and you know, that's what's important for putting together these machines. Our optical and floppy drives here. You'll see our 2.5 inch hard drive. It's a SATA drive way in the back there. We've got our socket 775 motherboard here. This is an Intel desktop board, and this one was interesting. It's an older board, but it still checks out. But it didn't have great support for processors. And I had to go through and test all my 775 processors. It would not take any Core 2 Duos. It would only take Pentium 4s. And that presents an issue because with socket 775, there are actually, I have a number of Pentium 4 processors that didn't have NX bit, didn't have any of that support. And even the ones that I had, the 820 and 830 processor I had wouldn't work in this, but the 630 did. So this isn't good. This isn't good because it means I have a single core processor installed. It's a little bit better because the 630 at least has hyper-threading enabled. So it does have 2 threads to be able to do Windows operations, but because it is not an actual dual-core processor, that is a bit of a knockback. It would have been better if I could get an 820 or an 830 working in here that is a dual-core non-hyper-threaded, would be a little bit better performance. In the same way that if you're looking at one of these older machines that are using Core 2 Duo processors, right? It's only a dual-core non-hyper-threaded, but it still manages to get the job done for standard desktop work. So this is a little bit of a challenge. The second piece on here is I do have DDR memory installed, but I have been running low on higher end DIMMs, higher capacity DIMMs. So for DDR1, no, I'm very low on 1 gig DIMMs. These are my last 2, this matched pair of DIMMs. And just like on DDR2 memory, I don't have any, I think I don't have any 2 gig DIMMs left. So, it always represents a problem. I'm always looking for more of the larger memory capacities for these older machines in DDR, DDR2, and DDR3 to be able to get these machines up and running the way they should be. But that being said, we do have 3 gigabytes of RAM installed in this machine. It's dual channel, so pair of 1 and a pair of 512, 3 gig total, which is okay. Now, because we've got onboard graphics on this system, it is using the graphics card will take some of your memory from the installed memory. I don't want that, so I want to install a discrete graphics card. The problem that's presented with that is you may see here down here at the board the lack of something. It's the lack of a PCIe by 16 slot, which this desktop board was not completed with, which means you couldn't just install a standard PCIe graphics card into the system to be able to get up and running. Now, underneath here, what you can't see is a pair of PCI slots, which are useless in this case, and then a by 1 PCIe slot. So what I was able to do was take one of these mining adapters, right, which goes from a by 1 to a by 16 slot, and that's this little riser here. It connects via this USB style cable, and then it takes some power from a Molex connection from the power supply to make sure that this is getting the full 75 watts that it needs to be getting to be able to power whatever graphics card you install. And then I happen to have this what is generally considered to be one of the worst PCIe graphics card ever made, at least in current reckoning, which is the GT210. Yes, a piece of garbage GT210 with 512 megabytes of RAM. But it's a low profile card. So I was able to get some low profile brackets that I had in my bin of GPU parts and connect that up to this. The second problem that I have is when you use low profile brackets, their plug or their screw connector is reversed from a standard PCI bracket. So it's kind of upside down. I have no idea why that's done, why in a small form factor PC versus a standard tower PC you would need to reverse the way the brackets screw in, but okay. So we had to screw these in upside down essentially, which means that I wasn't able to install a bracket in the bottom to cover that slot, and in the top also, because I needed to use a zip tie to be able to secure this on both ends of the card so they wouldn't flop around inside the inside of the case here, that causes a little bit of a challenge as well. So I can't put brackets here. It's okay, it needs to breathe. There's no fan on this card anyway because it's passively cooled, so a little bit of extra airflow kind of getting through into the back end and pushing things around with this one fan kind of makes sense. The other challenge I had within this case was the brackets here and down at the bottom where the hard drive cages would have been were gone as well off of this when I had received it. I mean, this is one of those cases I got from somebody that had nothing in it. I think it might have had this floppy drive in it and nothing else. So putting a full-size hard drive in here would be more difficult, a 3.5 inch. I would have ended up having to tape it down on the bottom of the case, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'd rather have it up on a wall or in a slot or something. I would have installed a 3.5 inch with I have an adapter to adapt a 3.5 inch to a 5 1/4, and I would have installed it up here, but again, I have no slot cover, so that created a little bit of a challenge as well. So what I ended up doing is, I do this a lot with these cases, is I'll get a laptop hard drive and I just got some double-sided tape and I taped it up against the back wall there. It's nice and out of the way. And the fact that it's a SATA drive, it's only SATA 2, but the fact that it's a SATA drive gives it a little bit, tiny bit better performance than if it was going to be using an older style IDE drive. And then I just use that single IDE controller to power my DVD burner. So it's okay. It's okay. Now, but will it work? That's what we want to know. So what we'll do now is get this thing put back together. We'll screw this case back on. I will get it plugged in to the bench monitor, and we will take a look and see how it goes. Okay, we're all plugged in here, so I'm going to hit the power button and you'll see how long it takes to get booted up and ready to go. Having that SATA hard drive obviously helps. It helps a lot. One of the things I'll notice about this is I found on these older machines, Windows will actually get to the desktop relatively quickly. The problem is that because we've got this single core, even though it's hyper-threaded processor, the thing that Windows 10 usually does is it gets to that desktop and then it continues to load other background applications, your startup applications, right? So it's going to load Cortana or Windows Search. It's going to load your Skype if you haven't disabled it. It's going to load your OneDrive if you haven't disabled it. It's going to load Windows Defender or whatever antivirus program you've got up and running. And all those background applications, they'll just continue to process over the next couple of minutes. So that experience of booting up and just getting right into Windows and starting to work and starting to entertain yourself or whatever is much more noticeable on these lower end systems. Like, you really can feel the drag when you're trying to get something done after that quick boot. So we're into the Windows desktop here. Again, as I mentioned, there's stuff going on in the background. Let's get hardware info booted up here, and we will take a look at some of these specs on this puppy. So you'll see here, just in the time that it takes for hardware info to get loaded up here, you know, that's a real challenge with that processor trying to work. It's pinned pretty much 100% of the time trying to run the instructions that hardware info is trying to run about pulling all that sensor data. So we'll take a quick look here. No, I don't need to update you. We'll take a quick look here. As I mentioned, we've got that Intel Pentium 4. This 630 was the most powerful of the LGA 775 processors that I could get to run on this motherboard. Now, it's entirely possible that this D915 GLVG board, which is what's in here, could support a more powerful processor if it had a more proper BIOS version. So the BIOS on here is the VG91510A.86A.0048. The unfortunate part is I am unable to locate any info, drivers. Thankfully, Windows 10 found all the drivers for this, but BIOS updates, anything like that for Intel boards. And I think that that's a problem that a lot of people have with any of the older products that they have that Intel produced. They've deleted all the old BIOS information, all the old driver information. So it's kind of hit or miss to try to find little bits and pieces here and there. Yeah, otherwise you're pretty much screwed. At least in this case, I think I am. I don't think I can find a more powerful or newer BIOS version to work in this that could possibly support more powerful processors. Even if I could just get one of the dual-core versions of the Pentium 4, would be better than what the 630 is providing from a performance perspective. But that being said, it is what it is. It's a 3 gigahertz processor. It's got that hyper-threading. It can handle Windows. It's just, you know, not very good at handling Windows. So the other piece that we've got here is the memory. As I mentioned, we've got we've got some OCZs here, a pair of 1 gig DIMMs, and then we've got a pair of the Nanya Technology 512 megabyte DIMM. So it's a total of 3 gig worth of RAM. And then we have, for some reason, this is weird too, Hardware Info is picking up the Intel GMA 900 graphics chipset, but we're plugged into the GT210. Maybe it's just that Windows, this computer is embarrassed. Actually, I can switch over here. I was going to say Windows is too embarrassed to show that it's got a GT210 installed. But here we go. It's showing up here as the Asus EN210 silent. Silent being the fact that it doesn't have a fan, so yeah, it's going to be silent unless there's coil whine. And this is a GeForce 210 showing up as a GT218 underneath it, so whatever all that means. Again, it's a 512 megabyte of memory on here. It's DDR2, so it's not even DDR3. Like, that's even worse. So I wouldn't expect, much else going on here. This whole time you'll notice that while the system is pretty much only doing, just showing this information, the processor's been like pinned, like running at full speed the whole time. It's really having a tough time operating here. So I'm going to shut down hardware info, and we are going to show off one more piece here, which is to start up Microsoft Edge. And I just want to show you the challenge that you're going to have with an older machine like this trying to run a Chromium browser. We're loading up the splash page here. Even just in a dual core processor, this would probably take half the time or less than half the time to get everything up and running here. But as it is, it's taking the time it takes. I'm going to go to YouTube, and we are going to go and run CrabRave. I have done this already, so that's already known for me, but it will, whether or not it's going to be a surprise for you, we don't know. We're going to run at 480p because I already also know that this processor is just not going to be able to handle 720p. I already know that a dual core processor, a Core 2 Duo, has trouble handling running this at anything other than 360 or 480. So we'll pop up Stats for Nerds. We are trying to run, right, again, quite a large screen on here, right? This is a 1600 by or 1920 by 1200 screen. So the scaling, the resolution scaling is gonna play a part for this as well. I'm just switching to the full screen view. But once we get everything figured out and caught up, deal with the pixelation of it being in 480p, but it's able to run it. So again, for a time specific, right? This is a 2005, I think, 2005 processor. And it's like the end of the line for Pentium 4, right? This is one of those processors where they carried over from socket LGA 478 to 775, and there was, I think, 5 or 6 processors in 500, 600, and 800 series that existed before the move to Pentium D and then the Core 2 Duo Core and Core 2 processors. And yeah, but it can handle 480p, right? Those 25 frames that we dropped is those 25 frames that we've dropped is still the 25 frames that we dropped when we were, messing around and getting the video buffered and getting it moved to full screen and all that stuff. So it's moving around quite nicely. It's looking good as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I think that this is going to be okay. The use case for this actually is going to be hopefully the person that's going to end up using this particular machine wants to watch their church broadcasts, I believe, from home. And I don't think that it's, 480p is probably not going to be an issue. It's probably not upstreamed by anything, more up, maybe 720p anyway. So this should be fine for them to be able to hook up to their existing environment, move out the old Windows XP machine that they've got running today with this machine that's a tiny step up, and at least they're able to get this machine running and doing what it needs to do. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this old box here, this FrankenPC that we've created. And as always, I hope you're staying safe and healthy, and we will catch you in the next one.